Blessings, everybody. This is Dale. Thank you so much for joining with me today on the Word Podcast. We are pressing on the Psalms. We're in the 78th Psalm. And as I warned you to get going on this one, this is a long Psalm. Was it 72 verses, something like that? And so we're 2/3 of the way through it. And in the previous episode, we saw how the psalmist gave us an example of God's power, how God brought his children out of Egypt. And he went through all the details over it, okay? As a matter of fact, this psalm is a really good synopsis of major portions of the Old Testament. That portion right there is what happened in the Exodus. What we're about to read, he covers the entire book of Joshua in 2 verses. And then some other verses appeared to cover things that happened in the book of Judges. Okay? And so it's quite an accelerated time frame right here of what he's referring to. And so it's a good synopsis. This 78th Psalm is something that's good to learn because it gives you a really good overview of a large portion of the Old Testament. So in verse 52, where we left off previously, it says this, "Then he," and that's God, "led his people like sheep and guided them in the wilderness like a flock." So his people have been delivered out of Egypt. Now they are in the wilderness. And remember, the Lord was going to take them to the promised land, and it would have only taken a couple of weeks to do that. But they decided to send out a committee, and then the committee came back, and the committee gave a negative report. 10 verses 2. 10 said, "We can't take it." 2 said, "Yes, we can arise, we can take this land." They believed the committee report. It cost them 40 years because they believed a committee report. I'm serious. We would do well to listen to the Lord rather than listening to the opinions and the fear of man. So here the Lord is guiding them like a flock. Verse 53, he led them in safety so that they were not afraid, but the sea overwhelmed their enemies. So he's recounting what happened when the Lord parted the sea. Verse 54, and he brought them to his holy mountain, to the mountain which his right hand had won. Or his right hand, the hand of power, had purchased, had gained, had acquired. I find that all sort of interesting. The Lord owns all things, over all things, et cetera, et cetera. We know that. So did he have to buy this from somebody? Was there a battle that he had to win? Was it a reason for acquiring it by power? I highly suspect so. There are battles and things going on within the heavenly realm that we know not of. Verse 55, he drove out the nations before them. He apportioned them for possession and settled the tribes of Israel in their tents. So there you have the whole thing of Joshua, them crossing the river, going in and driving out the nations. The Lord did this before them. He split up the land as a possession, apportioned the land, and he settled the tribes. Okay, all in one verse. Verse 56. Oh no, yet. Oh gosh, that's like but, right? Yet they tested and rebelled against the Most High and did not keep his testimonies. Now, Lexington puts a period right there and says they did not keep his statutes, period. And then picks up the next thought with a sentence. The other translations I'm looking at continue on with the sentence. Verse 57. But turned away and acted treacherously like their fathers. They twisted like a deceitful bow. Now remember, the beginning of this psalm was the psalmist was saying, hey, we need to declare the wonders and the power of God and what he's done. We need to declare it to the generation after us and subsequent generations, to where we will always remind of what the Lord has done. That's the reason he's recounting all this. So now what's he saying? He said the Lord settled the tribes in their tents. He gave them the land. And now they provoked the Lord. That's what the King James says. They provoked the Most High. They tested him. Okay? They rebelled against him. How do they rebel? They didn't keep his testimonies. They didn't keep his statutes, his commandments, his instructions. And not only did they not keep them, they turned away. They turned away and acted treacherously, unfaithfully. And they did it just like their fathers. And he gives an example of how they did it. He said that they were like a twisted, crooked bow. Well, if you got a bow and arrow, and the bow is crooked, and you try to shoot the arrow, how's that going to work? It's not going to be good at all. Matter of fact, you may wind up with self-inflicted injuries, right? Well, he continues on, verse 58. For they provoked him to anger with their high places. They moved him to jealousy with their idols. And you say, oh, well, we don't do that now. We don't have graven images now. We don't have idols. We don't have images. Are you kidding me? Yes, we do. And as a matter of fact, sometimes we do it in the most innocent and the most sincere way. I saw it just recently. At the time of this recording right now, it's, what week is this? Third week of July, 2024. And the Republican National Convention is meeting right now. This is the week after the weekend when President Trump was attacked. Remember that? Yeah. And so at the convention, they had someone came up and gave a prayer, an invocation. What does an invocation do? It invokes. It calls forth. In our culture, our nation usually is a Christian invocation. They gave a Christian invocation, someone who calls upon the name of the Most High God. But then they had someone else to invoke other gods, literally to invoke other gods. Now, what that's going to do is what we see right here, that it moves the Most High God to jealousy with their idols. Now, I know what people are going to say. Well, we're a pluralistic society. You know, people worship other things. They have other faiths, this kind of thing. That's true. That's true. That's true. But they're wrong, and they're grievously in error. And those who believe in the Lord Jesus Christ need to proclaim the truth. I mentioned earlier that we're in the midst of our question series on Sunday morning, and we've got 2 or 3 questions related to this, and all around basically the same idea. There's so many faiths and people are so sincere, surely God will let them into heaven. It's always about letting them into heaven. It's never about being in right relationship with God. It's never about bringing the kingdom to earth now. It's always letting us get into heaven, Well, we forget one thing, and this is the foundational thing we must hang on to, folks. Jesus Christ is the only one that rose from the dead. Is the only one that defeated death, the greatest fear of mankind. All the other did not defeat death. None. So that right there sort of points and verifies to the one that is the true reality, does it not? So what do? They provoked God. Folks were doing the same thing. They moved him to jealousy. So what did God do? Verse 59. When God heard, he was full of wrath, and he utterly rejected Israel. Verse 60, he forsook his dwelling at Shiloh, the tent where he dwelt among mankind, and delivered his power to captivity, his glory to the hand of the foe. Now, we'll probably pick this up in the next episode, but you see what he did. He was furious. He was angry. And so where he would tabernacle with them in the Mosaic tabernacle, he abandoned it. He forsook its dwelling place at Shiloh, and he delivered his power to captivity, delivered his strength to captivity. We literally see where the Ark of the Covenant was captured by the Philistines. You ever wonder why that happened? Well, this is what's going on. God's just handing his power over to the foe because his people rejected it. His glory to the hand of the foe, to the hand of the enemy. There was actually blessing there. Anybody who had the ark was blessed by it. But this is what God will do. You reject him, he'll say, okay, don't worry. I'll leave you alone. You never want to be in that situation, okay? Well, again, I'm Dale. We'll press on the next episode. See y'all then.